Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Pruyn, and I am delighted today to be joined by my good colleague, Erica Forte, for a conversation about perinatal mental health. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So, Erica, as I think you know, I enjoy allowing my guests to introduce themselves because I always end up learning something about them. So, what would you like our audience to know about you?
Well, like you said, my name is Erica. I am a licensed mental health counselor in Massachusetts, and I'm also a licensed clinical mental health counselor in Vermont. Vermont's stuck in an extra C, so they really make me think when I introduce myself. Um, I guess I am a mom of two crazy, rambunctious, wild little boys. Um, And I'm a dog mom of the sweetest, most lovable pups. You can read into that however you want about how I introduce the kids versus the dogs, but the dogs came first. Um, I guess I am happiest and feel the magic in the world the most when I'm on a ski slope in Vermont. And I am most at peace in life when I'm at my parents' lake house in New Hampshire. Um, and that is, I guess, me in a nutshell. Um,
Beautiful. I love the image of the lake house in New Hampshire.
mm, it makes me happy inside. It's my happy place since I was born. So,
I can see why. So, before we get underway, I think it's worth mentioning that this conversation may touch on some difficult topics. So, listeners are just invited to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself in the course of this conversation, including deciding maybe this isn't the conversation you need today. That's just fine. So, to kick things off, Erica, I wonder if we could just start with something really basic, which is
mhm.
how exactly do you define the perinatal period?
Yeah, the perinatal period is sort of that time frame from conception through the first year after giving birth. And it's sort of split in two. So you have that sort of prenatal or antenatal period, which is that period during pregnancy. And then you have the postpartum or postnatal period, which is that year after you give birth.
Mhm. Okay. So that's actually a very long period of time. It's not just when you're pregnant.
Yes, it is the 40 weeks of pregnancy and that year postpartum.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm curious, how did you come to work specifically in perinatal mental health?
Yeah. I started my private practice in September of 2023. Um, and primarily I've had lots of different roles. I've worked with lots of populations, but primarily I stuck in that sort of trauma um niche in my private practice. But as I was starting to figure out what I wanted to do for myself in my private practice, um, I thought about sort of my own experience a little bit and what was lacking. Um, with my first son, I had a very challenging pregnancy, both physically and emotionally. Um, his birth, I guess, could be classified as challenging. He was born via an emergency C-section. Um, I remember hearing him cry when he was born, and somebody brought him over for me to meet him. I could not tell you if it was my husband, if it was a nurse. It's all very, very foggy. I remember very little from the OR. And I remember being very disinterested in meeting him. I was relieved he was alive and I could hear him cry and he was out of my body. I was most relieved that he was out of my body. Um, but I really had very little interest in meeting him. And it wasn't until maybe he was born a little bit after midnight. And it wasn't until like 6:30 the following morning that I really interacted with him in any sort of meaningful way. Um, it was a very slow bond. Like that bonding, it was a slow build. Like I knew he was my kid. I knew I had to take care of him, but like that emotional bond was not there off the get-go. Um, we both hated breastfeeding, both of us. It was a mutual dislike. Um, but something we sort of kept at. Um, I remember the hospital like asking me how I wanted to feed the baby, and I did not want to breastfeed, but did not advocate for myself in that moment. Um, and I remember after having like a talking to another friend who was pregnant and due maybe a month later and sort of sharing my experiences. Um, and she was so thankful. She was like, no one has talked about it. Like, I also didn't feel immediately attached to my baby. I felt like the worst person. Um, I had another coworker who had a lot of challenges getting pregnant with her pregnancies. Um, and again, she felt so unsupported. She felt like nobody talked about things. And like in those conversations, I felt like there was such a value and there was such a missing link. And I wanted to help people. Like my story sort of inspired me. And also, it was different because my second pregnancy was so healing in a sense. It was so easy. It was an easy pregnancy. I was marched on down to the OR, remember the entire C-section. He was also a planned C-section. Um, Again, it was a slow build with bonding, and there was some struggles trying to navigate how to split my attention between two small kids under two. Um, but it was so much easier. I advocated for myself that we weren't breastfeeding. This kid was going to be fed. He was going to be bottle fed, but fed and cared for. And I also knew during Jackson's pregnancy that I needed to get myself a perinatal specialized therapist during that pregnancy. Like hindsight, I have no doubt that I experienced sort of prenatal depression with Micah, but no one was looking for it. No one noticed it. No one spotted it. It was such a challenging physical pregnancy that that's where the focus was. And understandably so from the OB's point of view, where they're making sure I'm physically okay and the baby's physically okay. But there is this big void and emptiness that is not nurtured for mothers. Like no one noticed. And a lot of it is just chalked up to like, well, pregnancy can be tough.
Right.
So I think that my experience led me to wanting to sort of help others and sort of show that this is okay, that like 1 in 7 women, data-wise, experience sort of a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. And like you think about that, like, is that number right? Like, I wasn't officially diagnosed, and I have no doubt that I had one. Again, in hindsight, with my clinical expertise, I can say that, but how many people experienced what I experienced and had no support and didn't realize that's what they were experiencing and felt like something was wrong with them?
Right. Right. That is powerful. Well, Erica, I just really appreciate you being willing to share your story, but also to then use your story to support others through your work. And what it leads me to ask about is I feel like a theme in your story, both yours and the friend that you talked to, is that it seems like there's uh, societal expectations of motherhood that sometimes influence uh, um, mental health for the mother. I wonder if you could say a little bit about that.
Hmm. It, yeah, it's this sort of all these assumptions, right? That all pregnancies are planned or all pregnancies are wanted. That it's really easy to get pregnant, or on the flip side, it's really hard to get pregnant. Um, that, you know, if even if that pregnancy was planned, that pregnancy was wanted. Like planned and wanted are two different things. And both of those things can be true. It could be planned and that pregnancy could not be wanted at the same time. Um, and this like idea that pregnancy means fulfillment, like you see like this glamorized Hollywood eyes, like you're glowing, you're pregnant, and it that's not necessarily true. And then the baby comes and it's all these other assumptions, right? Breastfeeding is natural. Animals do it without help. Like, so it should be natural. It should be easy. Why can't you do it? Why is it hard? Oh wait, you're not breastfeeding? Oh, you're giving that baby a bottle? You're giving him giving the baby formula? Like, oh, that's not best. Breastfeeding is best. Um, that just this idea that being a mother is instinctual. Like that the baby comes out and we should just automatically know how to do everything the baby needs. And we should automatically know that this cry means hungry and this cry means diaper is soiled or and this crying means tired or whatever. Like it's just supposed to be this instinctual thing or that mothers can do it all themselves,
Mm.
that they should be able to do it all themselves, that we should be able to care for babies or care for babies and other children. And on top of that, make sure you're taking care of yourself and fostering your romantic relationships and maybe keeping the pets alive. Don't kill the plants. Oh, wait, you have a career? Go to work, make the money. Why? What do you mean you can't care for your kids and make the money? Oh, wait, you work too much. Who's watching your kids? You send them to daycare? Oh, you're staying at home? Oh, that's not a real job. It's just all of these things and this pressure, and people have opinions that, fine, have your opinion, but whoever the mother is, like they're doing the best they can, and they're the best mother for that baby, and they're doing the best they can. And those mothers need support. They need fostering. They need love. And they need all those societal expectations to just be taken off of them and just even as simple as how are you? What can I do for you?
Yeah.
What is working? What is not working? What is hard? What is easy? What is your experience life like?
Wow. Beautiful. Um, so I understand, Erica, as you were going through some of that yourself, you connected with an organization called Postpartum Support International. Can you tell us a little bit about that organization and what you ended up doing with them?
Of course. PSI is great. So I found them professionally, not personally. But would have loved to have found them before personally, but they're a worldwide organization. They represent social support networks that play a significant role in prevention and treatment of perinatal mental health. Um, they have this mission to just promote awareness, prevention, treatment of perinatal mental health worldwide, and focusing on sort of childbearing in every community worldwide, not just the US, but just this worldwide initiative. I believe when um, I took trainings with them. When I took those trainings, I believe they were spanning 40 countries. That at that time they were reaching 40 countries. And really, their just objectives are to bring awareness about perinatal mental health, about how to provide support to parents and families. Obviously, there's a big focus on perinatal mental health and like the mother, but it's also about the family and that system around the mother. Um, and shout out to sort of the dads out there. I believe that 1 in 10 dads also experience some sort of perinatal mood disorder, like post baby showing up.
Mhm.
Um, Again, don't quote me on that. My memory is trying to think back to the stats from when I took it at 2023. But I believe that was the stats then. Um, and they just engage in like public policy, advocacy, um, training. I highly recommend everyone look up their website. They're an absolutely wonderful organization.
Wonderful to know about. And, as I fully take in what you said about societal expectations around motherhood, it almost feels like society is setting up women uh, to struggle completely unnecessarily. And then
Hmm.
in your own story, you also mentioned how our country's medical system does not always do the right thing. So
Mm.
if you think about our medical system, what would you say medicine could do a better job of in supporting perinatal mental health?
I think medicine can just do better at seeing the mother as a whole, like holistically, and seeing the mother as a human being, not just this vessel that is carrying this fetus, that the mother is a person by herself, and she deserves to also be seen and also be examined, separate from the fetus. And like there are check-ins, how are you feeling? But they're very vague. And in fairness, I guess, to OBGYNs, like they're trained in the medical side, they're trained in the surgical side. And maybe there needs to be some crossover on how on to train people on the mental health side. Like and I can't speak for all practices. I loved my OB. I had a great relationship with her and that office. I had both my kids through that office and that practice. But the only time I was screened um, for any sort of perinatal mood or anxiety disorder was at my 6 week postpartum check-in, and they gave me uh, the Edinburgh postnatal depression screening tool and said, fill this out. We'll come back. We'll look at it. And they looked at it quickly, said, okay, you're good. They didn't ask questions. They didn't do a follow-up. They used the screening tool. And as therapists, we know screening tools are helpful. Like they can sort of guide a conversation, but that's not the end all be all. We've all seen people fill a screening tool out and it doesn't necessarily match the what we're seeing in front of us, especially when we ask questions that are open-ended and asking how they're doing. Um, and then you think of someone like me, like I know how to sway that exam. I give people that standardized test. Uh, like there needs to be a better job and there needs to be more questions about like how the mom is doing. And even like the pediatrician, or my pediatrician has like screening questions. Are you safe at home? Are, do you feel sad more than half of the days in a month or something similar to that? But where does that information go? And also, who is looking at that information? I had a client who screened as high risk on the EPDS scale, high risk for a postpartum disorder, high risk for suicidality, and no one looked at her screen. It came to light weeks and weeks later after she had experienced significant mental illness and her husband had brought up significant concerns about her presentation, went back and looked at her screening tool. Like there is such a just gap in that support service. Like that poor mom was struggling. She wasn't a bad mom. She wasn't not doing what she was supposed to, and the system failed her. And she is doing wonderful now. I saw her. Um, she is doing great, but it's just so sad that there's all these sort of cracks that people just fall through because the focus is on that baby.
Yes, yes. And so I'm hearing that uh, not only the complexity of pregnancy biologically, but how societal expectations don't position women for success. And then there's a medical system
Hmm.
that has enormous blind spots towards mental health. Um, so
Yes.
given that complexity and your experience, if you could sit down with a room full of expectant mothers, what do you wish? What are some main points that you wish all women knew as they go into the perinatal period?
That they matter, that their experience is their experience, and it is right. Like they're not doing it wrong because they feel different than what the movies show, that they aren't having the same experience as their sister or their friend or their mother, that like it is unique and it is okay to feel whatever you feel. It is okay to ask for help. It is just okay to focus on you and want to do things that bring you joy. And just because you are pregnant, just because you give birth, doesn't mean that you have to lose all of you in that baby. Like, not saying neglect the child, but also foster you and don't neglect yourself because without you, what does that baby have?
Mhm.
And what do you have?
Mhm. Foster you and don't neglect yourself. Focus on joy. That's what I heard.
Mm.
That-
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, so as you know, I'm an EMDR trauma therapist, and you mentioned that trauma was also something you focused on before coming to the specialization. So I'm curious to just maybe focus the conversation a little bit more specifically around trauma and perinatal health. So maybe one way to put it would be if you could address a room full of EMDR trauma therapists, what would you want them to know about the perinatal period in particular? What are ways that trauma can sometimes occur during this time?
Yeah. Um, I think it's challenging because sort of my favorite thing that I've ever heard, sort of to describe sort of perinatal trauma, um, it may have been in the one of the PSI trainings too, was a quote by Beck. And it literally was just saying something along the idea that trauma is in the eye of the beholder. Like the event itself doesn't necessarily matter. It's how that event is perceived. And I'm sorry to Beck because I probably just butchered his quote, but those are the main points. Um, but I think that's important because my whole experience I know others who had a very similar emergency C-section as I did. And to me, I didn't actually find the event of the emergency C-section as traumatizing as just the entire pregnancy as a whole. And just were there points that I was like, oh, this kind of sucks and I'm a little bit concerned? Yes. But to me, I didn't really find that traumatizing. However, I know others who have had very similar emergency C-sections and it rocks their world. They can't function, they can't focus, they can't let that baby out of their sight. And their response to it was a very trauma response. So I think it's very much a person centered and don't look at the event, but look at the entire situation. Because for me, the sort of the experience of being pregnant with my first son, that is what was traumatic. That is what was so challenging. That is what sort of put me into fear about even remotely considering having a second child. Um, because I did not want any part of that experience of those 37 weeks I was pregnant. I didn't want that ever again. Um, and it's not exactly what you think of when you think of trauma in pregnancy. So I think it's very much like talk to and really hear what people are saying and what parts of the perinatal period were hard and traumatic for them. Um, and also be kind when we're asking some questions, especially to mothers. Um, know that just because someone was pregnant and experienced pregnancy doesn't mean that they have a child or doesn't mean that they have a living child. Um, and know that each person experiences things differently. Some people consider each miscarriage, they name those babies. They have a bond to those babies. Other people don't consider that as being pregnant with a child. It's over and done with. Um, So I do think that it is this really specific thing. And especially with birth trauma, so people who experience trauma at birth when the baby's being born, know that normal events that people celebrate, like a baby's first birthday, you see like balloons, parties, cakes, cake smash. Events like that can be so challenging for a woman who experienced birth trauma because yes, it's a year since their baby was born, but it's also a year since they experienced this horrible traumatic event. And it is the anniversary of their trauma, not the birthday for their kid. And it's just remembering some of those nuances because it's just, it's a different way of viewing things than how we view sort of DSM diagnostic criteria of trauma.
Yes. I love how you put all that, Erica, how individual it is. Um, and I think it also speaks to what you were talking about medical screening instruments, uh, that, this really needs to be a conversation rather than a survey. Um, and so I just appreciate that so much, and it resonates with the work that I've done as well. But I just really appreciate you putting it in very specific terms around perinatal mental health. Um, so you mentioned that men sometimes can also be susceptible to mental health issues during this time. I'm wondering
Mm.
what's what would you like the men of the world and the partners of the mother to know about pregnancy and mental health generally?
Um, I think uh I feel for them. Um, it is also not an easy time for them. Their life is also turned upside down. Just regular routines, everything has changed. And in regards to like supporting their partner, sort of asking what they need, asking how they can help, um, listening, truly listening to what that answer is, not just like hearing the words, but actively listen. Um, for me personally, the more my husband asked if I was okay, asked how I was doing, and like would check in, the more infuriated I got and like the more I shut down. Like I will let you know when I need help. I want space, go away. And he is the best husband, the best father, but and he was trying to do what he thought was best, especially because the hospital put a lot on him. When we left, they're like, "Look, keep an eye out, postpartum depression may look like this. Um, if baby blues are normal, but if she's crying more than normal or this or that." So every time I any emotion, are you okay? So listen, so listening, and also like you don't have to, it's not just on you. The hospital often puts it on the partner because they're there. Um, at discharge, moms can't drive themselves home. So a lot of that is put on them. Like, take care of yourself. If you have questions, bring other people in. And so try to support the way the mom needs it. Even if, like, offer to take the baby, even if she doesn't want to give up the baby, so she can take a shower. Um, and allow for self-care. Like, taking a shower is not self-care. Eating a warm meal or drinking a warm cup of coffee is not self-care. Like, offering to send her for a mani-pedi or let her take a walk or go get a massage or whatever the mom's enjoyment is. Um, try to help that way, um, and lessen the load for her, both mentally and sort of task wise and physically.
Mhm. Beautiful. So once again, the focus is on treating the mother as an individual and doing so
Mhm.
relationally. Um, okay. So again, acknowledging the complexity of this kind of work, what over the years, Have there been things that may have been for you surprising or particularly gratifying about focusing on this work?
I think just seeing women realize that they're worth the effort that they put into themselves, that they can be more than a mother. Like in my introduction, I said I was a mom to those two crazy little boys, and I am, and I love them dearly, and I would do anything for them. But I also am so much more than that. And I think it's allowing women to know and mothers to know, like, they don't have to not be them anymore just because they had kids. Yes, things change. Yes, I can't just, it's a snowstorm. I can't just jump in my car and drive to the nearest mountain and go skiing because I want to. Like, I have responsibilities. I have small humans to care for. However, I'm still allowed to go do that as long as I make sort of arrangements that the children are cared for and watched. Um, so it's knowing that you don't have to lose all of you just because you had kids. Like you still deserve to be you and do the things that you enjoy and take time for yourself.
Yeah, so important, so important. And I have to say that dovetails with so much EMDR work I've done around different kinds of trauma, where what ends up happening is the client ends up working towards actually believing I'm enough, I matter,
Mhm.
over and over and over again. Okay. So I'm curious, what's something that you don't usually get to talk about that you might want to talk about?
That is a very good question. I don't know, you know me, Peter. I'm a very chatty person. I usually talk about anything that comes on my mind. So this one, that is a challenging question. Um, Honestly, I think this conversation doesn't come up enough. This conversation isn't had enough. And I think the more we can have conversations like this, just the better things will get. I think it just starts at being open. Um, and just not living in silos. We're told, right? Women are, I don't even know where it comes from, but like, don't tell anyone you're pregnant until you're hit that 13 weeks and you're out of the first trimester. But that leads to 13 weeks of isolation and going through it alone. And if you experience a miscarriage, you're experiencing it alone when in reality, about 25% of pregnancies end in miscarriage. It's very common. 1 in 7 women experience perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. It's common. There is um, just so much there, and there is such a support system. And why not talk about it? Why not allow for it?
Wow, beautiful. And I just have to share, speaking specifically about miscarriages, you tell me, but I'm not aware of any society or religion that has an organized mourning process for miscarriages. Do you?
That is a very interesting question, and I don't.
You know,
That is a really good question.
because, throughout the centuries, one of the purposes of organized community and religion has specifically been to provide a holding environment for mourning processes. And I just feel like miscarriages are just erased from the map of grieving.
They are, and a lot of times they're not seen as like, well, medically, they're not seen as a viable pregnancy. So a lot of times people don't think of them that way. Um, and it is true. It's sort of, it happens. You, if you're lucky, get some ta days off of work, to deal with the physical aspects of it, and then it's back to your life. And a lot of, because most people don't disclose they're pregnant and most miscarriages happen in the first trimester, it is this very sort of lonely experience people go through and traumatic experience. Um, and if you've had one miscarriage, you're more likely to have another. and it's so challenging for women. Um, and I think that you're right. Like you hear people do individual things, but as a broader sense, I've never heard of. I've never heard of that.
What also comes to mind as we're talking about this is the trauma pioneer Judith Herman once characterized the essence of trauma as the experience of disempowerment and disconnection.
Hmm.
And that just seems to resonate with so much of what you've been talking about. And then that idea also signposts the path of trauma recovery, which is cultivating the opposite, a sense of empowerment and connection.
Yeah. And it is such a, it's so hard because you grieve and then most women or a lot of women want that baby. So they try again. Um, and if they're lucky enough to get pregnant, a lot of times they are petrified up until the point where they lost the first, up until the next benchmark, up until the second that baby is here, because it could just go away again just as easily as before. Um, and people mean well. Um, People really mean well. The But the response should not be like, well, you can try again later. A lot of people go through it. It's how can I help you? How can I support you? What do you need? Do you want me just to sit here in silence with you? Like that needs to start. We need to normalizing that being the response, letting people feel and have all those emotions and not trying to fix it for them because it's not fixable. Um, yes, as therapists, we have tools to help sort of treat and recover and get them to a place where they can sort of reconcile that trauma and have and function in a healthier way. But it's okay to let them sit and experience what they're experiencing, and we don't have to fix it.
Yeah, beautiful. I think what also comes to mind to me as you're describing this is the additive nature of stress. So that
Hmm.
in the case of miscarriages, as you say, if it's um, someone has a carriage and then they have another, if they hadn't been able to mourn or heal from the first one, then that's just going to add more to any future experience of pregnancy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So now we've come to what I always find to be my favorite question, which is if you miraculously woke up tomorrow and found yourself to be queen of the world, what would be one of your first acts?
I really want the answer to this to be something like profound and really impactful, like I don't know, world peace or something. But really, if I was queen for the day and I could have anything I want, it would probably be that all I would get a room full of all the puppies, and my husband could not veto it, and maybe one or two mini goats. That I would have control, and all of those animals could just be lovingly loving and cuddling up on me right now. Um, it, yeah, and maybe that ski lift tickets would be a little less expensive. And then something really impactful for society to make the world a better place, because I really believe there's a lot of good in the world and there is so much good out there and everyone deserves the best. But selfishly, I want the puppies.
I mean, you're the queen, you can do what you want. And what I'm hearing is a focus on joy.
Mm, yes, there you go. That's a very good spin. I like that. I want joy for everybody.
Fair enough. Well, Erica, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. This conversation reminds me that, I looked it up, Erica. We first met in 2014. Hard to believe, 11 years ago. And
Mm,
I just always saw you as someone who I deeply respected, both as a clinician as well as a human being. And we lost touch for a little while. And, I wasn't completely surprised after reconnecting with you that you had embarked on this very important work in the way you have. And I just really admire you for that um, as a colleague and as a friend.
Thank you. I appreciate you having this conversation and asking me to talk about it.
Pleasure's mine. So I'd like to give my guest the last word. So is there anything you'd like to say in parting?
I want to thank all of your viewers for putting up with my coughing and my cold. So I appreciate you sticking through this with me. Um, and really just be kind to one another. Ask questions, really hear what people have to say. And if your friend, your sister, your niece, your whoever is pregnant, has a baby, ask them, really focus on them. And when you go meet the baby, interact with the mom first. The mom gets lost. Um, Say hi to the mom first, and then go squeeze and snuggle that cute little baby. But remember, the mom was there first. That's why you're there in the first place.
That is a beautiful point to end on. Erica, I can't thank you enough. Look forward to future conversations with you, and thanks so much for coming today.
Thanks, Peter.
All right. Take care.